Are you crooked?
Yeah, move it over this way. No, it's gonna hang a little weird. Just move it over here. Slide the whole thing over and raise it up a little bit. Bring it closer. There you go.
Raise it up.
That's fine. Just leave it like that.
Okay, fine.
Thank you guys for joining us. It's at 9 o'clock hour. I know I'm a few minutes late. Um, I was actually planning on talking about something different, but just couldn't do it. So you ever have that voice in your head that just won't stop? Just keep saying nope, 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 nope. You need to talk about this, which is crazy because it kind of goes with what we've been talking about. So that's interesting in itself. Today we're going to be reading out a few verses, a few chapters. Um, I had got a phone call earlier from a friend of mine that was having some trouble, some going through some things in that moment. That friend of mine had asked, "Why is God doing this? Why is God doing this to me? I have been doing so good." And in that moment, I was letting that friend of mine vent. Um, I assured that friend of mine that God is not doing this, that we make decisions sometimes, and those decisions have repercussions and consequences, and the things that we do lead to other things. And that tried to assure that friend that God has a plan, and that if you'll just talk to God, that God can give you peace, and in that peace will come understanding, etc. And today I want to talk to y'all about that because that keeps popping up, and it actually goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about these last few nights. So yeah, I think we're just going to keep going with it. So why does God allow these things to happen? That's the question. Why is God doing this? That's another question. Um, why is God putting me through this? Why is God allowing me to go through this? Why is God making me do these things or allowing this in my life at this moment? Well, folks, God is not throwing it at you. We can go back and look through the Bible, and Job is the first one that comes to mind. Obviously, Satan went after Job, and God allowed it to happen. God allowed it to happen. He didn't do it. He wasn't the one out there making all these bad things happen. He just stepped back and allowed Job to go through these things. And the Bible assures us that God will use these things for good to save many lives. Job went through some stuff. And I can attest to quite a few people who have been at rock bottom with everything gone. They've lost their family. Maybe they started out losing a loved one, and that led them to drugs, and then they lost everything else. Literally being at rock bottom. Some of these folks were successful. Some of them had a lot, lost it all. And when I'm talking to them, they tell me that they read the book of Job and they relate to Job. That Job has helped them get out of the situation that they were in. See, that's an example of how God used what Job went through to save many lives. Those folks are reading about Job thousands and thousands of years later, and it's helping them. They're seeing hope, they're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. They're gaining understanding because of the story that's in the Bible. God did not put these things on Job. God was in control the entire time. Satan went to God more than once. Okay, okay, he didn't buckle this time, but let me do this. You hear that key word? Just let me do this, and then surely he'll buckle. Surely he'll give. God says, okay, do that, but do not take his life. God was in control the entire time. And not only was God in control, after Job went through that, God blessed him immensely and gave him back everything and then some. So, if we were to look at Job, we can see that aspect. But sometimes that doesn't help you feel better when you're just going through some trials and tribulations. It's one thing when you're at rock bottom and you've lost everything. That's one thing. You can look at Job and you can go, oh, there's hope, and figure out a way to come back. But when you're just going through something right now, you're arguing with a loved one, your car broke down, you lost your job, whatever the case is, uh, we're so eager to go, why, God? We talked about Paul being shipwrecked on the island last week or earlier this week. We talked about him being snake bitten. He never blamed God. He never looked up to God and said, why? He simply shook it off because he knew that his God was in control. He knew that the enemy would attack. He knew that the enemy would try. But he also knew that the enemy would not prevail. So Paul had a little bit of a step ahead of us because he knew these things. So I want to read some scripture out of here that hopefully will give you some assurance of what I'm telling you is true. God is not going to put you through these things. He's not going to attack you or tempt you because God cannot be tempted. He's not going to tempt you. So let's see what James says. So in James chapter 1, verse 2, it says, God bless those who patiently endure testing and temptation. After they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God never tempts. God is never tempted to do wrong, and he will never tempt anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful action, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. Remember what death is? Death is a life without Christ. So, when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. Pretty strong words there, huh? So, again, remember, God is never tempted to do wrong. So, if he's never tempted to do wrong, he's not going to come and do you wrong. You understand? Let's go back here to Galatians chapter 5, verse. I'll tell you what, let's go Galatians chapter 6. It says, Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back into the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. If you think that you are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself. You are not that important. Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else, for we are each responsible for our own conduct. Folks, that's important for us to understand. What you're going through today, you're responsible for. It's easy to blame somebody else. Oh,